So my name is Brian Wright. I'm the principal of town planning and urban design collaborative, leading a team of consultants here to start, for the concept of the property. You'll hear people talking during the meeting. That's my team. So we basically set up our office here. So we come in from most of us. Then California and Miami and all around. So we've all come. We set up our office. We haven't put pen to paper yet. We haven't made the first mark on the plan to figure out what we're going to do here. This is a bit unusual. So we had an opening presentation last night where we talked about planning principles. We talked about the property, about the zoning, and there was a lot of disbelief of like, how can you be doing a development project and asking for public input when you don't have a plan? And so, we'll get there on Wednesday. Budget presentation where we'll actually present what we've come up with this week. But you may hear them tearing paper off and crinkling it up and all that, and making first marks on the they're doing when we get done with this meeting. But the point of these meetings are topical meetings. This is utilities, infrastructure, and transportation, I think. And really a sort of a free-form meeting. We've been doing some homework, looking at the regulations. Some of you may have gotten calls from your different agencies and talked to some of the team, but we're still in our information gathering because what we want to do is make sure we understand what all the parameters are, things that would be challenges and opportunities for us in this meeting regarding infrastructure, and then kind of extract information from you guys. We also have people from the public here who aren't affiliated with any agency or entity that are disinterested, and so they may have questions as well. Common question we would see in a meeting like this, and they may say, "Well, I've heard we don't have any water capacity left," and then well, actually, we have 50,000 more units, you know what I mean? So just kind of getting some of that stuff squared away for us as well as the public. But I will say this: in these meetings, one of the things that I want to do is make sure that we're all talking to each other, that we're all, we talked about this last night, all seeking to understand and really trying to be respectful of each other. We may, when it comes to utilities and stuff like that, it's disagreements, it is or it's not. But there may be disagreements around the table, and that's okay. That's part of why we're here to understand all of that. So if we could start off with just going around and introducing ourselves and say who you are, here.
I'm Nelson. I'm Derek.
Jonathan. Everybody. That's Calvin. Good boy, back.
Josh Pender,
David Russell. I'm just part of the public department, Auburn University.
I'm Coco Van Horn, also a landowner.
Hey, Joe.
John Wood, landowner.
Larry Prince, Russell.
David Robinson. We're here really because we coordinate the Metropolitan Planning Organization, programming and federal fund programming. We're interested to see impact.
Very interested. Brian Hudson, TPUDC.
Clark Bailey, Kinley Horn Associates. Scotty Burnick, Reagan Smith.
Which project is out on file?
I'm a landowner down the street.
All right, so I thought maybe we could start off. We've got two of our engineering team members here, so maybe you guys can kind of tell us what you've learned so far, and it's awesome. Really, if you were here last night, you'll probably realize that I was working more with the idea guy, so when it's getting things like this, I got to count on my team members. So I'm gonna do a lot of listening and talk.
Yeah, sounds good. There's sort of just go through again a little bit of some basic due diligence. We've looked at is trying to understand some of the water, septic, anything from stormwater, pieces like that, power, gas. So we're primarily look at utilities, understand what's available. I'll note a lot of times, when we're working with Brian, like we get asked a lot of questions, like, well, what improvements are needed? And in order to get there, we really what we'll do is after last night and today, and by the end of the week, we'll actually have a plan. So for us as consultants to provide good information, we'll need to understand, well, what's the development footprint? How many units are there? So what we do early on in the beginning is we pull together base map information. So we pull together maps back there. We'll look at topography, slope analysis, look at floodplains, any kind of streams and buffers that may be along there. We try and get our hands on as many of the public utilities that are available. Sometimes that's just GIS information. We'll reach out to the groups. A lot of them are here today, so we'll be learning stuff here on the spot as we're talking through it. I've met with the county and the city just sort of high level as we're looking through different subdivision regulations. Each jurisdiction has a little bit of a different requirements, but we go through and try and break down and understand which one applies, which one doesn't. Everything from even septic, depending on which approach you go with. There's different jurisdictions that regulate that. So probably just kick off with water, and we've reached out, and Nelson, I think we've worked with you just a bit and got some base information. At a high level, we identified some of the mains around the site. So on, I know Lee Road 88, which is basically to the north of our site, there's a 6-inch main where 86 and 88 goes up towards 280. There's also a 6-inch main there. Around the site, which we don't necessarily touch, but it's 8 and a 10-inch main along the highway at 280. I know that there's an 8-inch on West Farmville Road that's south. The overall property has a small corner that touches that. The scope area that we were talking about last night defined is smaller than where we initially started with. So the part we're looking at is a little bit further north. So the overall property had a piece that touches that West Farmville Road. And then there's an 8-inch main on B Road 188. That's to the west. There's several tracts of land that are between that road and the property that we're looking at. There's I think a 1 million gallon tank sort of northwest Dawson Road and the interstate. And it looked like the 10-inch main line was coming down the highway to the east side. Looking at that, we noticed some, hydrant right there at the intersection of 80 and right by we call it an entrance. We haven't defined where the entrance is on the site yet, but at the northeast corner of the property. But really, yeah, just looking to understand sort of some of the infrastructure that's in place. A lot of times, once we have our plan, we'll know a density, and we would submit a availability request to your department. Say this is the number of units that we anticipate, and then we would look to see what the flows are and understand if there's existing infrastructure works or if there's improvements that are needed. So sort of we're very early into it. Don't have the density or the unit count. That said, last night, Brian, I think we were at 300 acres. Just on county math, that would say you're allowed by subregs or anybody that has property to get one unit to the acre. So not sure if that's where that will be, but that's about as much as we have at this point from an acreage standpoint or density. Beyond that, really just trying to understand the surrounding infrastructure and pieces that you see be beneficial to the project.
Also, two concerns we've heard. I asked In regards in regard to water, the question was, how is this going to impact me as a neighbor? And I said, I mean, your water pressure, because we hear about a lot, in a rural area like this, and that person said, no, actually, I'm on water quality. So,
Again, we can't really speculate out because we don't really know. We're at a good point now where we're using more water than quality. Yeah. So the quality concern, we're more used to things like that. As soon as you have more turnover and you're flowing more water through there, you have a big, thing. More that we can use that to turn that over faster. Quality is extra.
that's good, because one of the questions people said was, well, how is this good for me? Kind of develop. I always try to look for those opportunities where, even if you don't want development, gotta have it.
Well, anytime, everything, you like to think about it, don't tell them how long these bottles. But we try to turn that tank over, every 2 to 3 days, it's kind of hard for us to do that right now, because, the tank is put in, hoping for growth, expecting growth. And, so anytime you can use more water, in this tank, more tank.
That's what they're doing when they go around.
Flush tires.
Talk about that one.
Yes, sometimes I know as in our site, looping it, having the areas where you can,
We've done a few things up in this area right here, probably not long ago, just kind of, make it a little better on maybe. Right. Anytime you got a dead end line, that's never good. Sometimes you can't help it, but any kind of.
the loop system helps that a lot.
The more we can do that, get a dead end line.
For those who weren't in attendance last night, what we're trying to do with this project is what's called an agri-hood. And so we're basically, incorporating productive agriculture, interlaced with development, and doing, called conservation subdivision. So we're gonna, instead of just doing, the easy math based on the regulations, if you can do 1 unit per acre, instead of just carving up the whole property into 1 acre lots, and having, all the yards cleared or whatever, the idea would be to cluster the same number of units, whatever the number being, and we have to leave 50% of the land open for conservation. And so part of that we want agriculture. So what, rather than just flushing out the hydrants, we use that water for irrigation.
Well, that just be something that's a possibility. And it's just according to where it's at, I mean, like, we do have one place in Roxana area. That is always,
Yeah,
we don't have that issue here. Short dead end line,
okay.
you're kind of.
Yeah. Sometimes different jurisdictions will have, gray lines or different types of water we'll be able to reuse. On a site like Brian mentioned, this particular project would have an opportunity more than most to be able to take advantage of that. Sometimes that's just irrigation or simple things like that.
I have a question about the rules and regulations that the county and the city will approve as it pertains to rainwater collection and use of gray water. I personally would like to see every home have its own tank, rainwater collection tank, and have that tank and kind of maybe set a covenant on the property where low Topical water cannot be used for irrigation. The only use of irrigation would be rainwater collection on the property. Maybe from time to time when Topical wants to get out their lines, and also if you all are considering using gray water for irrigation. Because I know that that's where the city comes in. The city's planning rules don't necessarily allow for that. They don't like to incorporate that. And decide to put a composting.
City is maker of gray water.
I have a piece of property in Auburn that has a rainwater collection process, and I think I am the only resident. And I think it's because I did it way before anyone even knew it was
They have talked to them about this. It's not.
happening. I know they have commercial properties, but don't know if they have residential. And my property actually, we use our rainwater for our toilet and for our laundry and for our irrigation.
Yeah, a lot of times, on another project we're working on right now, from a stormwater perspective, we're maintaining, try and keep all of it on site. We have regulations where we can't release at a higher flow than it is today, but for us, maintaining some of that water, it could be for a catfish pond, or it could be, again, for orchard use, depending on where the water is and what it's used for. We look at trying to fill a retention or retention. Depends on the soil type and if we have to line it or not, but we're able to collect that and use it for irrigation. That's just beneficial for everyone, the folks that live there, that reduce
I mean,
costs.
we have a history in this area of not being responsible with how they tear out property and what the stormwater runoff does. I mean, anyone who has been here for 20 to 30 years might remember what happened. Wetlands that were built, and 72 was kind of Fargo Road was not usable for a couple of days or weeks. Because the issues that they had with the water, they tried to save the wetlands. My opinion, irresponsible.
Well, the Scotty's point is
And also just the runoff from the development to 80. But like at my house, the amount of water that comes down after a storm, it's not good.
so the project I talked with Agriculture, all gray water reviews. We had to go through and talk to the city about it, so I've got it on my list. Or not. And also to your point about responsible and sustainable site clearing, development in general. What we hope to do in this project is show how that. So, a lot of times it's just so that, yes, those are some of the things that are question about, well, how is this good for us as neighbors? Well, while we look for some things that are directly good for you as neighbors, we'll also be looking for larger, greater. Has another development where they're like, oh, we saw what they did at Fielden. They didn't just clear cut every part. They didn't sort of break stuff. So now we should have to do that. The tricky thing is, to your point, I mentioned this last night, it's like, we're going to do the things that I talked about in the presentation as much as the city and the county will allow us to do. And a lot of times they don't object to it like principle. It's just literally like the regulations such that, they have to write the regulations to protect against sort of the lowest common denominator the development is doing, like you're saying, which then precludes something extraordinary like that's happening. Some, we go through the trouble of teaching. So we're going to do our best.
To that point, I know that there's one or two small developments in the area that have been allowed to not have curbs. And not having curbs is such a simple thing that can be done to help us. And that, but I do understand that the city of Auburn has allowed that in a few places. So that's another issue.
Two things about that though. One is, that's one way to do it. Especially in a place, a project like this, where we're just in the rural context, it's not typical. So architecturally to see her, you know, it's more of an urban thing. And
That's
so
something that Auburn would not do.
they had to have a curb.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, and so what we. What we're doing there, even though we are close to the city, but it does want that character, that rural character. We're doing the bioswales, those two, just a planter strip with a street tree that would have a curb. And so basically the drainage is set up so that it flows right into the bioswale. It infiltrates naturally, it's treated and all of that. And so you have to do it curb if you aren't thinking about it. But not, when I say swales, and the people are thinking about the ditch of County Road. But yeah, we'd like to find curb gutter. A lot of developers don't do this. Fortunately, bioswale, that's cheaper than curb and gutter. Ultimately, you get the look.
We want to. Especially if you plant it with some
That's
pretty and put fruit trees. I think a lot of people out here probably have fruit trees.
landscaping for sure, but in the bioswale, we got to make sure. Water level. You can also deal with on the road, so there's certain plant lift. But I've been thinking about it a lot too, because sometimes you see bioswales pioneered out of the Pacific Northwest. You see some of them in your time view and great looking. So we've been trying to take that even to the next level. It's like, what sort of plants, you know, being in a bioswale, don't just droop over and fall over. Actually, think about like a field of wheat. Wheat is beautiful when it's green, flat. When it's harvested, now golden, it's still up by the blows. So we're trying to be in its so that it looks good.
And hopefully it's all.
Are there any improvement or projects that you all have happening or plan on happening in the near future in the area?
We just had, just real quick before we move on to this topic, can I address this topic? Sorry to interrupt, I was patiently waiting.
You're good. You're good.
Felt like that was an opportunity. So, love the concept, Julie, that, you know, harvesting rainwater. It was in your presentation yesterday, from what I recall, kind of the vision, right? I have no idea what, you know, regulations would need to be considered from the city and the county to actually do that. But to Julie's point of like, hey, what if this was actually part of the covenant? You know, and so moving to the practical point, that kind of ties in a bit of my concern I was last night of like, it's one thing to see the presentation up there. It's a whole other thing to actually now see in practice that the idea is actually happening. So as far as like your job as a consultant and the design you're drawing and the submittal that I understand you're preparing the city, would a covenant like that potentially be a part of that submittal so that when you're done with your engagement and you've moved on and other folks who are, you know, have to actually implement it, they would be required to adhere to that? Like, how would that process work?
Yeah, two things. Typically, again, we're still learning what the actual process is in Auburn. Last night, I explained that we're in the county, but we're in the city's planning jurisdiction, which means we have to adhere to the city's subdivision regulations. But we also have to adhere to any county standards that are more strict than those cities, weird kind of thing. But I think we finally figured out that we technically submit to the city and go through the city process. So that's, we believe that is certain. And so, depending on when the city requires you to put your covenants and restrictions in place, the thing that normally actually catches you for that, and I mean catches you for what you say you're going to do, is that when you're going through all of the engineering you have to do regarding stormwater and all that, you have to plan in advance to do this gray water capture. I mean, it's not just like, oh, we're going to put a cistern on the side of the house. It's part of a, you know, very intricate system, a whole separate pipe system stuff. So it would be in there, and that would be part of what we're submitting to the city hearing for them to review. But first, before we go to the trouble of doing that, we're gonna meet with them and say, hey, are you good with us doing this? If that, then, at that point, it's part of the project. The covenants and restrictions aren't even necessary because the actual, neighbors or anything like that have nothing to do. It's just underground. It's just like your sewer. You have a covenant in your HOA document.
I actually think about the individual. But my suggestion was, I would like to see a community with a covenant that says every house will have its own rainwater collection. So then there's a closed system in that house. And I understand that's not something that would have to go to the city this early in the process. But, you know, when you asked us last night, like, what are your things that see in this project? I would love to see the development, to see that we will, you know, and I get that because of individual landowners, we're eventually going to be selling these lots to individuals, and you can only control what an individual does on their own property to such an extent.
Yeah.
But if the developer was willing to say, we'll commit to 50% of our homes having rainwater collection so that each home has its own closed system.
We're doing
Not
that
just-
in our project.
Yeah, not just the development having a closed system, but each home. And again, like if you're selling a 10-acre lot, that lot's going to be treated so differently than a home that is on a half acre. So maybe it's like all these smaller lots have their own rainwater collection. So I think what he was jumping on is, would the developer commit to something like that to all of us as his name, as their name?
I think it's both. I think, you know, because there's a larger, big picture of the recycling operation, and then you can do it on. Just because, I mean, here's the truth of the matter. We had the point last night. There's a lot of things you can do that don't cost a lot of money, with just a little forethought. And so imagine if, like, you know, your sort of new homeowner gift, like your ring, it's installed and your downspout disconnected, and
My
you
system's a very,
can do that too.
my system's a very tank and nobody sees it.
Well, sometimes we like for people to see it,
No, I get it,
so they
but-
learn about it, but yeah.
I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. I'd say one more thing.
Please do, and then then I got one more.
I would like to see, I have never driven down Lee Road 88. I mean, I've driven up 280 and then hooked onto 188, but I don't make a point of driving down other people's roads very often, unless I'm going somewhere. So I was looking on the map this morning, and I just noticed how many of the people involved are truly on the Loblocking Creek. So I would like to put this out to all the community members that are here, that we should all work together and we should create a Save the Loblocking in the same way that there's a Save the Saugahatchee.
Yeah, Bill, go ahead.
And work together with this developer to create true conservation easement along the Loblocking. Again, I don't know how many of you were here, how long you've all been here, but Save the Saugahatchee had a big voice in dealing with the quarries that have come into our community over the years. And those risks are real. And, you know, we can all sit here and say, what's the developer gonna do? What's the county gonna do? But I'm gonna say, like, what are we gonna do? Like, as landowners? So maybe this development and this process can bring some of us together that live on the Loblocking and truly work together to protect that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, making sure that if you do something like that, that maybe the first thing you do is set about of like, here are what we see as best practices. You know, it's like, okay, if you're gonna do development, here are the things. So for instance, in some people, depending on your position on environmental stewardship, some people think, well, if you're gonna do preservation, then people just keep getting anywhere near it. Others want people to be able to experience lightly. So like in Nashville, they have a program, Cumberland River, this Greenway program. So every property when it's developed has to dedicate greenway so that they're more than that part of the trail. So you're looking at, sometimes when you hear a state, so, right, so it's more like, oh, is it threat? It's about to be ruined as opposed to protect, effort. So I would just encourage you to do that, to make it proper.
So to Julie's point, and what I hear you saying is you can bounce some ideas off the city, see what they can allow from an engineering standpoint with underground rainwater, gray water, harvesting, reutilization, something like that. That would be a part of your submission that if approved, then basically builders, developers would have to adhere to what is in that submission. But it's a separate issue to have covenant restrictions on the individuals. Would that be a part of your submission or not be a part of your submission?
Typically, early on, they don't require you to submit actual, like, ratified covenants and restrictions. They may, some places require you to submit like a draft or kind of what you're thinking about. And so it would come later, so you wouldn't have that protection in place in most cases before the project's pretty far down the road. But yeah, and here's part of the reason why too, the cities don't normally care about the individual system, because you can't count on it. Let's say somebody, Green Maryland system will get flogged up and it's not passing. I mean, so they don't give you credit for it, so it's really a whole extra thing. But it's, from our perspective, when you look at the thing that's neighborhood that is called a conservation subdivision, that, I mean, looking at it in a cynical way, it's good advertising. You be able to advertise it.
So then the answer, no, that covenant would not be included with the submittal to the city, right?
I think that's true.
So then my question is, if, like, is this kind of charrette process only related to the submittal items, or is it related to the covenants, as Julie mentioned, that could be discussed and added to the project? If so, how's that work? And then again, what assurance can you give folks that are involved with this that would actually happen?
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
So two things. One is, I just made a note here. Rainwater asked the city about it, so that's step one. And I was thinking it was big picture.
I think it's both.
Yes, exactly. But at first, before that clarification came along, so then my next sentence says individual water capture for homes. So now that happens. Normally, the way that so it manifests itself in a shred is I say, here's what we've heard. This is the thing, and we think that's great. Do this, and then actually you'll notice in the rendering, see there's rain barrels on each side, whatever. And then you go through the process, follow along. Whatever happened to the rain barrels we talked about, guys, standing in City Hall, and you're like, oh yeah, so you basically help hold us accountable in that regard. I think that there may be a way that, again, we've got to, that's what I'm looking for today. What is the city requires?
so what I hear you saying is that yeah, I guess I'm just not reassured by that something could be covenantally like included or required. Like you might present it in the final thing in your rendering, right? But then that's not gonna be a part of your submittal, and
Maybe you can say it in the submittal. You can't say it. It just won't necessarily be, like we say, part of our stormwater narrative or whatever. Here's what we're going to do, whatever. And the city goes, okay, great. We don't care about that, but it's in there. It can be in there, but it wouldn't be like, the city wouldn't try to hold us to it. I suspect, even though it will be in there. So if there's a way that we
Man, for you guys that live up here, I understand y'all. But for us, we're still at work, so if we could address what we need to
Yes.
address, it would help us.
yes, that's what I'm calling.
I want, man, I feel y'all, I do. I live here, I do. Get all.
You gotta get back to it.
if you could get done with us, and I'm sure Richard's got stuff to do too.
Yes.
And please forgive me, I don't mean to.
No.
If we could go ahead and address those, us out.
So write down what you're thinking. All right, go ahead.
I mean, I don't know, we're just at a point where y'all gonna have to give us more information.
Yes.
We're definitely, whatever, fit the community, we're willing to listen, and we've got water available. There may have to be a lot of infrastructure improvements for what the city requires you to do. City come to here and said, hey, you're going to be by our rules and regs, you gotta have 1,000 gallons a minute, We gotta evaluate. There's a lot of things up in the air for us that we can't even begin to handle. We have lines in the area, we've got storage in the area, we've got two different supplies of water available. So we're here to listen, and we're here to try our best to provide what everybody wants. We want to do what's right for y'all's community, because it's our community too. But we don't want to keep you guys from doing anything either.
But there is a process. I think that's a lot of times
Yeah.
people are concerned. They're like, well, how do we know you're not going to use up our water? These guys aren't going to let us use up our water.
Well, that's right. And I'll tell you guys up front, and I'll tell you because it affects everybody. We're not going to do anything that puts a burden on our customers, whether it's cost or quality or availability. That would be on you guys. And just being honest, and that's just the way the world works. I can't ask these guys who's already been here, that your bill's going up because these guys are coming in. We're not gonna do that. We're gonna do what we can do, and we'll say, you guys have got to, it's what you guys got. But it's gotta be a lot more information. Because we start a project tomorrow and provide water for 80 homes. They have to be a few things done.
But 80, you have.
We wouldn't have any, but now,
Yeah.
if they sit there and say, Auburn did, you gotta have 1,000 TPM for fire protection, we don't know I don't even know what the county rules are, to be honest. I know what Auburn's are. I'm sure you gotta deal with the county as far as what the volunteer. You're not gonna go into the city, how you gonna do fire protection? There's a lot of questions, but we just need more information. We're willing to do and work with everybody, especially our customers that we have now, and we're willing to work with you guys. There's just so much more information that we gotta have. And I know y'all don't know yet, so, and we appreciate y'all inviting us. And, man, I understand every one of you guys' concerns. If it was in my back door, I'd be like, hey,
That's right. You do. Kind of specific question. Also.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
You mentioned a dead end line. Where is that end of that dead end line?
One we were talking about earlier that we lose at the end of 280 will go.
Not that. That was not a.
It's not dead end now. We got a loop that goes over Ross Road. There's another dead end line over here. But then we go across the little bitty bridge. Well, both of them.
But the area we're
dead
talking
end line.
about, there is.
Not right in that area. It's all those are looped through. Like 88 comes all the way to 188 and Bonneville Road, around.
Yeah, Brian, it was just if there are any improvements that are happening that are coming our way, that we can reach out to y'all. The detailed stuff, once we have a plan and units, we'll reach out to y'all and go through the normal availability process. Appreciate y'all being here.
Well, we appreciate them, but we really want to know, we're very interested in to do what we can to help you. And again, I don't know how massive this is, to be honest, and I don't think you guys do it, you don't know what this is. You have to use 3 acres on your, it won't be 100. Won't be 100. There's a lot of barrels in there. But we're here and we're willing to work and do what we can. But I would think somewhere down the line it's not to be. That was just too hard to answer right now. But as far as having anything that's just outstanding, we don't have anything outstanding that we know is except on 71.
Quick question for the water guys. You mentioned fire flow and everything. So my understanding is that the proposed site is outside the city limits, outside of the Auburn fire jurisdiction. So if it was inside, then the city and the fire department require that 1,000 GPM for fire flow at the hydrants, right? And my understanding, based on talking to Nelson, is that y'all will require infrastructure and specs inside the subdivision for pressure, residential pressure, at the meters and all that kind of stuff, but not necessarily have a regulation that the developer would need to meet for fire flow.
We have no, we, forward our deal is that.
So then my question would be, so if we know, or we assume, we'll find out what the city says, if they would extend a regulation from the city limits also to something outside of the city limits that's still within their planning jurisdiction. But if they don't, then the question is, what's the county going to require? What do they have based on volunteer fire department? And let's just say, worst case scenario, they're like, we don't have any requirements for volunteer fire departments. I don't know what it is. So if they don't, then is there any assurance that, again, residents can have that even if you put in, a fire hydrant every so many 100 feet, which might be standard, that they would actually have a required GPM to meet fire flow? Is there any assurance of that we can have if no city or county is going to require it?
There must, I don't know the answer, but it would be irresponsible.
I agree. The county website says they. I mean,
Just say what that is for the GPM.
Well, Auburn used the International Fire Code also, there's so many variables to that, and I don't know the size of houses, how big the lots are, how close they are together, like normally when we look at some of the things, like in the rural areas, some of you guys don't have any fire protection close to your house. Or you may have just like a mini hydrant there. Most of my houses probably we're not in the fire protection business. Sure. We're here to provide you guys good quality drinking water. Fire protection is just a thing that kind of spins off of that. And I do know that all the volunteer fire departments that I have ever dealt with, and I'm sure Auburn and Farm will have a reciprocating situation. Yeah. So in one call, they'll go get things. Now, for a big development like this, there's a fire station on the road now, and I can't imagine it's not. That's not fine.
Right. I think just out of respect for everyone's time, maybe touch on power and just keep the momentum going. Yeah, appreciate it.
Hey, but y'all, you got the contact information.
Yeah, thank y'all for sending the maps and stuff to us.
So anything that y'all can do, better. We appreciate the invite, and we'll be glad to come back. And sorry for cutting you guys short.
No, I'm glad you said that, because we can keep talking and dreaming and all that stuff.
Thank you, guys.
See y'all.
Well, I want to know if, person.
They have.
Down 188, it crosses 280 and then just a short distance there, it goes from 3-phase to 2-phase. But it's all framed out. So that wouldn't be too big a deal, but if we got to go on down B Road 88 and serve all that 3-phase, and then we're talking. It's new. But other than that.
Say that again, where's the? 188?
188.
And then there's none down Farmville.
No.
And then down 88, you're saying. Okay. So basically you're still on this west side.
What type of commercial would require 3-phase?
You can have a grocery store
What a coffee shop.
or, well, I like that, a coffee shop, but you know how big a coffee shop is.
Roberts, you need it.
Yeah.
Right.
Like a cafe with like a grill with vents.
Yeah.
That's 3-phase.
It's one of those.
How does this
it can kind of
sound
be
to you?
both.
Yeah.
It's really kind of up to whoever building, designing the cafe, coffee shop. I mean, there's options out there for ACUs, single phase, and 3-phase, so it's up to the developer to decide. And we just need to know kind of projected load so that we can know really, like, we gotta have 3-phase this year. What's it gonna cost to get to that point? And basically, we'll have to take it to district we're out of Montgomery, and then they'll decide, okay, I'll have power gonna eat this call, or is it gonna be something that we have to deal with developers? Kind of deal. That's the main thing.
2 questions. Are you all exploring having a solar farm on the property? And would Alabama Power be open to allowing net metering?
That's a little bit more complex.
I know,
answer.
but that's part of the problem with solar in the state of Alabama.
So we do have some solar experts that we'll have to turn it over to. They ultimately will be the one to decide how we're gonna handle that.
But that's a way to address load
Yes.
without putting in too much infrastructure.
Mhm.
So just throwing it out there, something to think about.
Yeah, that's something we can get with some of our folks on and go ahead and make them aware.
And this would be a way for the development to show a new way of doing things in Lee County or Alabama. Because just up the road in Tennessee, they allow it.
And across the river in Georgia also, right? I mean, you cross 85 and there's a solar.
Just look into that, but we aren't planning on doing solar farm.
But then net metering by Alabama Power would be a huge help with addressing the road.
So ultimately, to your question about what requires or whatever, like some developments where, oh yes, it's big commercial and part of the viability of this, the developer wouldn't want them to be hamstrung by not having, so of course we're having, but in something like this, we may go like, okay, that's gonna be a limiting factor for what we do. We don't want to have to extend the phase, whatever, and so therefore you need to over that threshold. And we'll see when we get there.
Okay, appreciate it.
Oh, all right. Thank you, sir.
I'm gonna kick you out.
No.
Yeah, you're welcome. Were there any other utility providers here? Okay. Okay,
What was that question?
just other utility providers? Okay. Didn't know, I'm trying to
And I think
give the
most of
floor.
us have broadbands. I think that's the only thing that's offered. Point Broadband is who came, and it's not local. Everybody is someplace other than Alabama. But for the most part, they actually provide really good service. And I will say Alabama Power, I think, does an amazing job with getting things up and running after a storm.
Is septic or sewer part of the,
Yeah,
And then natural gas would be the other one that we're all in tanks, so.
Yeah, we
that's
have
what it
tanks and we have septic systems, or, I mean, I have a septic.
Yeah, let's maybe touch on septic real quick.
There, I just want to talk about, lines, utilities in the ground. That's what I hear.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so septic is a little bit of the same conversation I mentioned earlier. There's no public sewer here. Obviously, we'll be looking at septic. First things we look at is getting a USGS soil map, identifying the soil typologies, understanding some of those rates, identifying areas that could have septic and areas that can't. So we have those base maps. That's what we provide for the design team that's working today, just to get an idea of, call it a touch, no touch zone for that. Also with septic, depending on the layout, it depends on who's going to regulate it. So for example, if you had your, what I would call a conventional septic per lot, right? That'd probably be the most logical piece here. You have each and every owner has their own septic. That would be regulated by the state health department. The difference if you ended up having more of like a decentralized system, or you're discharging, or you had a plant, which is a possibility, you would be regulated by the Alabama Department of Environmental Management. So there's different options. I'd say there's probably 4 options that we would explore. Not all of those would make sense. There's just some that wouldn't be very logical. So what we will look at is doing a sort of the first idea is, can each lot have their own? Generally, you'd have some sizes in the 18,000 square foot or so lot. would be a minimum to squeeze the septic on for that. That's not talking about subregs or lot size, just purely septic. Then you'd have an area that would treat that. And again, the other option we would potentially look at is called more of like a decentralized system, where you'd have some treatment that would clean everything sort of off-site. So it could be, you could have clusters of decentralized, or you could have a larger treatment plant. Again, there's a lot of pros and cons to all of this. There's not a quick answer, but there are a lot of options. So it's not going to, we know it's not going to be the county or the city regulating. It's either the health department or Aiden is going to be looking at that. We would then also have to comply with all of those regulations and submit it. So that would be reviewed, whichever option goes. So I think as we get a layout, we'll be able to provide a little more guidance and recommendations on most logical type of system here that meets the standards.
And ultimately, that could end up being a limiting factor as well. So for instance, if we're just doing, if we're doing a system, and, well, how many acres of good soil do we have that's feasible to do your leach field in? And, some sites don't have enough. I mean,
Right. I mean, so like if it's a state health department, they're going to regularly say, hey, you have, 15,000 gallons per minute going or to a specific area. So we end up having tons of little septic areas again, which probably wouldn't make a lot of sense to have, 15 or 30 areas out, which gives us reason to say, well, let's see if we can condense it here, and or do it on each lot.
So we're gonna, knowing to Scotty's point about typical septic situation, that, requires a lot of a certain size. Well, if based on what we talked about last night in the subregs, if the minimum lot width is 50 feet to get an 18,000 square foot lot, that's like 50 by 360 foot long lot. That's a bit of an awkward lot size, right? So trying to figure out like how do we balance the kind of community character for some of those smaller lot areas with the needs, which then makes us have to explore some of these alternative ways of doing it. The other thing is we'll have some lots that'll be limited, so it won't be a one size fits all.
Right.
Situation. Some will be able to do it on their lots.
Isn't the standard 3.5 for rural with a septic? Like you can't have a lot smaller than 3.5?
3.5 acres.
Yeah. Isn't that why,
It's three.
isn't that why we see all these cuts
Yeah.
along 188? Yeah, but that's gonna apply here, won't it?
So some of the, again, I'm not a soil scientist and don't design these systems. The consultants that we've already talked with have done with the conservation subdivision that Brian mentioned last night, allows the smaller lots. So they've had success doing septic design and systems in the conservation subdivisions, which is regulated by the planning.
Yeah.
But it's in the county, so they've done sort of both in it. And because of where we're situated, the lot size is a little different. It's outside of that or within the city limits.
So, and one of the things that you see in these situations where you are clustering, if you will, we've done this in project where, hey,
Yes, I had some, when y'all draw up the whole, different phases and stuff, you give us all phases that gonna be involved in it.
Yeah.
So that way we can make us bigger and a little better.
Okay.
What we need.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
So, what we've done in some situations is essentially it can look like a smaller lot, it can be a smaller lot, but that 360 feet from it could be what essentially looks like park in front of it. And so there'd be this sort of the use easement, people can come out and access that, so it doesn't have to look like it's.
I mean, that may be a bad example, but you could also have like a cluster system where you have, trailers sitting there, 4 or 5 trailers that have been used. So, right, they may not all be on one lot.
You mean that's what you see in some cases? Not
Yeah, there's so.
So it's
Yeah.
We dealt with having I have an older home that was built in, the original house was built like in the forties and the septic system ran right along the Lava Creek.
Okay.
So we
Yeah.
moved our house to get our septic system away from the property. Yes. Everyone wonders why our house was moved, and that's why, it was because of our septic. And because of the amount of water that was coming downstream from all the development over the years. And so I have a very unique septic system because I've got to pump my shit pretty far. Because it's rocky. We're on a granite outcropping and we have red soil. And in order for it to be managed properly, you have to move it pretty far.
So what I hear y'all saying as far as with the septic regulations, that there's a number of options. It might depend on both soil type and lot size.
Yes.
And you're gonna be doing some legwork to figure out what makes sense for the land and the final plat, I guess.
Yeah, and to see like who's gonna be regulating it.
Yes.
Because
So-
there's different standards they would apply
Yeah.
on it.
Do y'all anticipate doing that work for Wednesday in the final plat?
Oh, no,
So
no.
my question is, and you mentioned, Brian, that septic could be a hurdle or an impediment to this project, right? So, let's say we get final presentation on Wednesday and it's 300 acres based on what you said yesterday, right? And, we don't know how many units will be on it. And you also mentioned last night that it sounds like you pride yourself and which I appreciate and stick with it, like you present a proposal or the plat to the community on Wednesday night, and then 3 to 6 months later, when that goes before the city, you challenge people to say, show me the difference, right? But a little bit what I hear them is like, there might be a situation where it's like, you present us something on Wednesday, but then you figure out like, oh, for the septic system, there's gonna be, 10,000, 15, 20,000 more gallons per day than we can maybe meet based on what's drawn up, based on lot sizes, things of that nature, right? Which, am I assuming that might require some fairly significant divergence then from what is presented on Wednesday?
I can take that a little bit. I mean, the lot size is a piece that is maybe to be determined, but we can quantify how much area we need to do either system. So if it's not done on the individual lot, right now, if we go with ADEM, I'm going to say, hey, this is the area we need for it. So from a planning perspective, we can account for that and plan on that now. So it's just a matter of, does it make sense to get them on site, or do we just need to have it go to this area that we're already assuming we have?
So, and the, kind of what I was saying earlier too, is ultimately what we would discover about septic would be a limitation rather than an expansion. So it might be smaller. I mean, I hope that at the end of this, everybody's, gosh, I love this plan. It's exactly what I'm hoping for. I'm based on what we heard last night, there may be a lot of people who are just like, you care less what the plan is. I just want to know the units and what the impacts are going to be. And so it would be a fraction of lessening of lots. I think is what you would find based on kind of septic, or we would say the same. If we go like, oh, well, we can keep it the same. However, what we learned is the soil over here, do this or that, whatever, we have to rearrange, that'd be something where, we'll have web page, we'll have plans and stuff up there. So I don't know, maybe we can come back and tell you guys what we did, we have to change it. But again, it's not usually the concern that people have is changing just because of whim, and it's
Or financial considerations, that's really the main concern.
yeah. So we'll try to figure out how we communicate, because again, this is just the beginning of the process, and we're not being this open to all of a sudden then just go disappear into our black hole and never hear from us again.
Which I hear you and appreciate it, but again, there's been a different experience in the community, so it's like, that's what a major concern is, that one thing said and it's not delivered, corners start to be cut, because that's the easy way out.
Yeah. So our process is to keep the dialogue in there. So just stay tuned, and if you don't see that, what the heck? Just raise the red flag.
But again, that's what's happened in the past and things still got ran through anyway without the consideration. So it's like, we hope that's the case.
Something the county health department's gonna look.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what you're talking about, because that has been, I don't know anything
Yeah.
that you're talking about. What I was gonna ask before, or the water people wanted to wrap things up, was can the development group commit to having another community meeting, say like 3 months from now, or having some kind of community board where we're invited to this process more often as it goes. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I think so many of your questions relate to how can we trust this development group to continue this process? And I think that all he's asking is, can we have the word of whoever the developers are, because it's not you. I mean, I think that that's what's
Right.
challenging here, is that you're not the development group, you're representing them. And I feel like it would be nice to know on Wednesday evening that the development group commits to keeping this conversation going, to allowing us to have a voice, even if it's, even just like a Google chat group or something, where you share information and people can comment on a Google document somewhere or something like that. Just
Okay.
Wednesday night, if the development group can, just give us some kind of commitment, that would be, I think, really helpful, and it would help everyone know, like, this is gonna be different than, yeah, and I don't know who you all are referencing that for the community.
Chat about it later.
Yeah, I mean, my standpoint, so much that has gone down in this area is really more about the people that own the land. Because the people that own the land is who decide what's happening.
So that's a good idea. So Wednesday I'll come back to you guys and say, here's what our strategy is. I didn't say this at the beginning. We're recording this, so if anybody wants to have it on the webpage, if anybody wants to watch it later, if you miss the rest of it, if you, I don't know if we have the ability to blur out your faces, if anybody with protection. Let us, next time, sit with your back to the camera.
We got Glenn Morgan here.
Hey, Glenn.
Saw a lot of saying.
Oh, good.
In the area.
Perfect. Tell us about it. Any thoughts about what we're saying so far about septic?
No, installing several in that area, there is a lot of rock. Concern.
Rock is good for septic, right?
Not when they install it. Oh,
You all just did my stuff.
I did yours?
Julie Cook, Schumacher gave me your number.
That's right.
Your son-in-law came out. He was great. He was surprised. I said,
Now I know exactly what, I know.
yeah, I have to go. I'm sorry. Thank you, everyone.
But yeah, it's gonna, once we get this done. We're gonna call, that. But they're 10 foot long, have 50 multiple lines, and just, it's video, that is, get a perfect on my side.
Hey, Glenn, sorry, will you speak up a little bit?
Hey, buddy. I'm just saying, the protest, a lot about, or I'm willing to do whatever I can to do my job. And
You're familiar with doing some of these.
well, I'm not licensed to engineer systems. I never really wanted to. I wanted to stay basic. I was a machinist for 12 years with plant projection of Microsoft and IBM. And then I went into this business, but I didn't want to because I dealt with all engineers in here. I don't like having to deal with a lot of engineers, but I dealt with them a lot.
Yeah, me either. These two are okay then.
But anyway, I just stay basic. Mechanical engineer system. Sleepless night, things go wrong. Basically, what I say. I would probably you know, maybe suggest, reach out to maybe Michael Patrick, who lives on that road. Small time, been on my septic system, it has for years. And give you a lot of information about that area. Maybe people want to, like, do the perfect. Right.
So we've got lots to figure out in that regard, because it's, what people are used to is one lot, one system.
Regarding the septic system you mentioned a while ago, it's about an east, it's not a more limited, lot size, pretty good at it. Lines. You're saying that 50% or more of this whole area is dedicated to open area or native area. Lines out into the pasture. And just use that area or open space.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, that figure out, you know, how to do it, because again, it's different than the one lot, one system situation, but, we've seen that in other places. Anything else?
If we want to touch on topics, but talk stormwater or whatever y'all want to, there's some other.
Yeah, I was interested in road.
Yes, that's what we're gonna talk about. Yeah. Yeah. It's like one of those things, the waitress comes up to you, to ask, you know, like, you know, yeah, this is a complicated project, lots of things to figure out, and that's how you see why people come up with this sort of, you know, the usual way. There are all the trees, and I'm gonna flatten the land, and I'm gonna do, well, you know, ultimately, the results will be amazing, but it means that it takes a little bit more thought, planning. Let's see, one of the things that came up last night regarding roads is, dirt road. What about that? So we're trying to figure out what the ramifications are. Hey, just in time. She got up, we're like, okay, how about transportation? Yeah, so.
Well, what's gonna be the main entrance? Yes. I asked the question, so.
Yeah, we don't know yet. Figure that out. It's one of those things that here pretty quickly, figure it out, but, you know, knowing that we've got, the dirt road there, already side there. Hate sort of, draw it out, so keep us off.
Sure.
This discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's pretty aware of generally kind of the roadway network there. The site fairly bound by four roads, 88, 86, 188, and Farmville. But of course, we're kind of looking closer up there towards the 88, 86 corner and where that intersection is. 88 is County Road, currently paved, probably not condition there. 86 is similar between 280 and that intersection, but shortly after that changes to dirt road down to Farmville. So as the development comes along, as we identify the ingress and egress points, if it's one or if it's multiple, all of that will feed into, you know, how does this development accommodate the new vehicles that would be on the road, where are they coming and going from? And the process for that is a traffic impact analysis, which follows a lot of, you know, industry standards, project the number of vehicles, apply that to existing traffic volumes, you grow the volumes based on when this would open and occur, and look at this kind of projected future condition to determine what are the impacts. Do we need turn lanes? What are the new traffic volumes on the roads? What type of infrastructure improvements will be needed to?
Yeah, and you know, what we're trying to figure out now is that there aren't clear standards currently in the county regulations as to, what triggers, there are some things about what triggers a turn lane.
Sure.
But when it comes to paving, when it comes to other improvements like that, it's some ways maybe just a subjective decision based on the county engineer. And so we're kind of talking through that with them as to like, how do you determine, I was like, oh, well, you need to pave the road. Well, yeah, okay. So if a landowner wanted to subdivide their property, they had 6 lots, they're gonna now pave like 3 miles of road to do that. Like what is the trigger? Is it 100 lots? Is it 80, whatever? So trying to figure out kind of how that works, and also assuming that there's some improvements that are made to a road like that, what are going to be phased? Because sometimes like we did a project in Florida, and it was like, okay, well, you can't go past this number of units until you have this north-south connection on the road. Because now we're going to relieve a lot of your traffic pressure that you would another road. So that's the traffic study. We'll go through and determine all that. And so that's again, there's like septic becomes a limiter rather than an expander. And we don't know. It's probably one of the biggest question marks right now we have is what are those parameters and rules going to be? That's why we did started that dialogue with the county, the city, to figure out the roads within the development. We want them to be ultra walkable, very safe for pedestrians, kids last night, biking. But we also have to be able to get emergency vehicles down the roads. So right now, the city has its road design standards, the county has their road design standards. Necessarily, their right-of-way widths are pretty obvious and wider than you would typically want for a safe walkable neighborhood street. But in a lot of cases, project like this, you would have in areas where you're clustering, where your development is, you would have actually on-street parking, and you would have a planting strip and street trees and sidewalks and all of that. And so we're trying to figure out is there a way that we can make the right of way kind of coincide with some of those things, because ultimately if you had 2 10-foot travel lanes, cars drive on, and then 8-foot parking lanes. And then you did the planting strip and stuff, you end up with kind of a wider right of way than they require. But if their right of way is intended to be edge of pavement, and now all of a sudden you've got highway width lanes running through your neighborhood, that's not safe. And so it's kind of trying to figure out, most of the time when development occurs, location like this, people come on driveways, driveway off of this road or a gravel lane off of that road or whatever. So it's another one of the complexities of the quirky things that we've got to figure out through this process. And we'll get there, but like everything, we have to have a plan before we can do the impact analysis. And we hope though to get some answers about triggers and things before we go very much further process. Because we can design it so that it can be phased accordingly. So when you're clustering, the cluster, we talked about last night, sort of you're driving through the countryside and historic place, or you're there's like a village that you come across, and then you go through the forest, there's another village. And so kind of that pattern like that, those little villages or hamlets lend themselves well to a phase, and so if we can find a way to kind of coincide that with any triggers or improvements, then that can be good, but not sure right now, because there's obviously a big expense of improvements infrastructure like that, and in most places, development, is responsible for making improvements to things. But there also is, in most places, the municipality or the county are also making improvements on the road. And so work together. So I understand there's now, or has been reenacted a dirt road paving program in the county where you can request or petition and a certain number of owners want that to happen. Funny enough, from our perspective, when you're doing an aggregate, the road to pretty awesome. You know, they're great for traffic calming, you know, it's, they're a little bit bumpy, rather than having one speed bump and another speed bump, you got a little speed bump, you know? But usually when we say that, the county, or maybe not this county, but a county, or the neighbors are like, oh, sure, you don't want to pay for road, you just don't want to spend the money. We're like, I get that. That's normally the reason why someone would say that. But for us, you know, we've asked for plenty of new gravel roads in agri-hoods because of the character. So consider.
Yeah, so regarding these entry points into the property, what level of importance are you putting on topography, views into the property as you're coming in, slope aspect and all that stuff? And also, I guess from a basketball and 1,000-foot standpoint, how far, do you already have a vision on how far you come into the property before you start to see development? Or you want to take people through rural agriculture lands first, or are they coming into the property and automatically seeing housing?
We don't have a vision yet. We will shortly. Typically, what I like is where you kind of come in and you sort of, you know, kind of experience the point of it, you know, so you go through some of the agriculture and all that. Then, you know, often we will want to sort of preserve along the existing roads, kind of the way it looks now, so that it won't happen within. So you have to go find the place, you know, that's how we often would do it. The first question about, you know, site distance and all that stuff, I mean, all that is vitally important. You know, there are regulations that are, you know, required to follow, but just from our own perspective, like, we want it to be safe and comfortable and easy to get in and out of it and all that. And so definitely going to be sorting all that into our, I mean, there are spots where you're like, oh, here's a logical place, we would love it, and then, you know, Clarkson, you're like, yeah, that's great, but, you know, it's like, you can't see more than 5 feet outside if you come out there, but if you move it over here, then, and so that'd be part of our process. All right, so, like y'all who were here last night.
Can I throw something? I'm interested in just y'all's experience as residents on these roads and, you know, feedback. Are there places that find unsafe or notice incidents, bad sight distance? I'm sure, you know, I think pavement's pretty easy to tell what works or not.
I've always, I think my kids on the dirt road every Sunday afternoon, for, I do understand that development's moving out closer towards our way and everything like that. So I'll shed a tear if it gets paid.
Do you think besides the 4-wheeler?
We go for walks down the dirt road, yeah,
Right.
and everything. And
one of the things we talked about last night was in this conservation area, 50% of the land in conservation, the intent would be to have a trail network and really this free range children concept. And so they're asking like, well, what's in it for the neighbors? From my perspective, that's right now, you get to walk down this dirt road. Well, that's because that's where you can walk, right? But how awesome would it be if you could actually get in and go through a trail network, get down to the creek, and call it farther and more interesting, beautiful. And so while you may lament the memories of being on that road, you actually may, you know, so see, I like the dirt road.
86 is also like, they'll come and redo the potholes every couple of months. It's
Great, yeah.
It's very narrow and it's very,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There is one steep kind of part right there as you kind of pass Kelly's place and the Wyndham Moses place. It's site. Pretty steep embankment on the uphill side.
For the folks, did I hear most of y'all live on 88? Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm curious kind of y'all's routes, like if you're headed to Auburn, I assume that's kind of a general movement. How do y'all get there?
50-50.
Not by the dirt road.
Mainly just head up to 280 and
It just depends on what part of Auburn you're going to.
Sure.
I'd say 50-50 for the most part. It's just kind of like if you come out and you're heading to the west side of town, you take the dirt road down.
Okay.
If you're heading more to like the north side of town, you're likely to take 280, but I'd say it's pretty even split 50-50.
And then my guess, just looking at kind of the network, is there's probably not a lot of folks moving from 280 to Farmville down 86. It's not really, because 188 is kind of that better connection if you were coming from the west, and there's other avenues the other way. But do y'all see a lot of like through traffic on 86 at all?
Yeah, and folks definitely drive it. When they drive it, usually it's quicker, but not as much as 188 for sure.
Okay.
Why do you say you don't run the dirt road? Well, it's smooth, but it leaves your car. Nobody.
Go going after it rains for a couple days.
Yeah. It's, I'd say it's reasonable. It depends. And I'll take my truck on it. I'll take a nicer vehicle.
I drove it yesterday.
Mostly.
They put gravel.
So individual, even though it's a county road,
An individual.
how does that work?
Just
Out of kindness?
self-interest. He lived on it. He was there last night.
He's got his name on the plaque. Turn on. Send it to
Adopt a mile.
Yeah,
That's serious adoption.
It's a real adoption, yeah.
He used to.
You like pass around the plate or you need donations or? That's interesting. And awesome. You haven't said anything. Okay, sorry, I don't mean to, that's on the spot. I just want to make sure because sometimes. As far as throughways are concerned, though, I do want to bring up that a lot of the contentious space of this, what you're having here, is based on past experience with the development team that promises nice roadways, throughways, but delivers significantly less than promised. And there are currently 3 driveways, 2 on 88, 1 on 188 that you could drive down and almost shake your car apart the way that it was left. And then the lots themselves, some were promised to have shared drive, but then later in the fine print, it was found that that was not a possibility, that you actually needed to cut your own driveway into the Lee Road, County Road. And so there is a lot of the contention you have with the neighbors here. When you look at it, you look at it from a standpoint there's a lot of concerns around that size of development happening in that space based on the infrastructure. But there's also a lot of concern around trust that was mentioned several times earlier today and last night around the development team that we've had experience with that do not deliver on their promises and make quality promises of those things. So we can provide those driveways if you guys want to drive down them. But based on our experience, if you pass over a plan and that's the end of your responsibility. If it's developed the way that these 3 have been developed, you won't want to put your name on it when it comes to time to be closed. Like Fielden will not be something you want on your portfolio. All things are said and done. Well, and that's, one of the things I was saying last night is there's a difference in scale, right? So when you're dealing with 3 lots, 5 lots, whatever, it's not a development, right? It's like, it's sort of DIY, if you will. When you're dealing with a development of this scale, there's so many protections in place. There's no like, oh, you promised this, you promised that. There's no room for that. The stakes are pretty large for the city, for the county, for the development team, for the community, all of that. But, just to be clear, we aren't just going to be delivering a plan. We'll be creating, working with years to create the submittal to the city that have all of the protections in place to talk about. Some of the stuff we were talking about a minute ago, like, can you assure us that you're going to do individual water collection? That's a whole different thing. That would be great. That's a interesting thing. It's not like, oh, if it doesn't get in, it somehow impacted you negatively. All the things that will could impact you negatively or a future buyer negatively are dealt with in a different way.
Those were truly driveways, the city and the county.
Trying to figure that out.
I mean, either way,
Either
city,
way.
they're gonna require you to meet their standards, but, here's how
Well, and also too, here's the thing, and it seems counterintuitive to say it as that, but ultimately, when you're looking at a project like this with a whole development team, investment group, all of that stuff, all of the concerns that neighbors have, well, I'm talking about the practical ones, not just practical considerations for provision of sufficient flow for fire hydrants, et cetera, are the same for anybody who is development, which means they're the same for. And so ultimately, if we were working on a project too long ago, and they're like, there's already a traffic problem here. This is gonna just make gridlock. Whatever, and how do you get? It's like, if we create a gridlock, no one's gonna want to buy into development. It's just not in anyone's best interest to do that. Who's developing it? The developer, while they may high five that they've got something approved, they haven't done anything until they've sold it. They've completed that, and it's obvious to a buyer whether or not there's a problem caused. Some of the stuff like fire hydrant flow isn't obvious, but there are these requirements. So ultimately, again, this is just a different, and not only your past experience, but then what the and so that's probably why the city. What else would you do that? What else? I was about to say a minute ago, the meeting was scheduled for an hour, I think. And I'm terrible at noticing 10 minutes, so we're 33 minutes over that time, but the next meeting is, but we warn your allowance. So, next.
Wait, Russell, y'all have anything?
No, really, our interest is from a systemic impact here, so, we're doing a 2050 long range transportation plan right now. It's gonna be, in December, for this area, we're projecting almost no population growth. I think it's like 11%. So
We need to go back to the drawing board.
yeah, well, if it goes through, then we probably will rerun. So, but it would, from our perspective, all of the problems with those roads are engineering problems, and those can be solved with money. We're looking more, we're interested more in the impacts in Auburn and Opelika outside of the development area, just to see how that's going to change our model. Other projects might need to be created elsewhere. Yeah, but so it's really outside.
Is it posted anywhere now for you?
The 2045 plan is on our website, lrcog.com. The 2050 plan is not.
I'm guessing there's no projects in the LRTP in this area.
No, there's not. Those roads are functionally classified, I think.
Yeah.
So they would be eligible for federal funds. That's really the MPO's role, is to take federal transportation grant money that is passed through the state of Alabama Department of Transportation, and allocate it to projects. The reason there's not a lot of projects out here is because counties provide a match, 1% match. So yeah, no projects out here.
Do you know if the county part of any SS4A submission yet?
They have submitted an SS4A, I think, for this cycle. I don't know that they were up. I don't know if they were.
Was it plan or for implementation?
On this topic, have y'all had discussions or looked at the bridge that then goes over Little Loblockie Creek on the dirt road?
Yeah.
Implications.
Looked at the bridge.
Looked at it, but I don't know what the.
It's quaint.
You know, I was gonna say, it seems quite charming, you know.
So kind of like that's just maybe up to the engineers also.
Yeah, I mean, that's
The
part
county
of that,
engineers
that's
require-
part of kind of the infrastructure piece. You know, similar to the roads, like, yeah, there's guidelines and all these policies and everything that would, you know, if it were triggered to be replaced, gotta meet certain standards, heights with load carrying capacity.
Knowing that the roads there could be eligible or are eligible for federal funding, said the only reason why it hasn't been applied for is because of the matching 20%.
Well, that and need.
Right.
This is not how.
Right. And in some places we go, people are like, oh my gosh, this road, I can't stand it. Why is this not paved? They're complaining about it all the time. And they're like, okay, so actually having some more houses, I'm looking at the water, having some more houses would trigger this road needing to be paved. So that would be a good thing. We could see it like that. And then it could be, the request could be made. And so that's that 20%. There aren't development impact fees in Ramsey, are there? Is that even, that's not even legal?
I think they're illegal.
Illegal?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, illegal.
Revenue. Yes, the benefit, the tax benefits. All right, well, this was great. We have lots of questions now, I'm sure, from this, so we'll be following up with those of you who are experts, and we'll be here for those of you who are residents. The next meeting is at 11 o'clock, and it is about farming, the agriculture, and so hopefully have farmers, people, the ag world. So if you're interested in that, please come